How about this one by Rainbot? Unsolved, Mayumi, Arashi, and the disturbing notes that could solve our case. By Rainbot, yeah. Okay.
This video is sponsored by Hunt a Killer, and in case you missed it last time, Hunt a Killer is a subscription box perfect for fans of true crime, ARGs, or just mystery solving in general. Each box is a single...
Damn, now I'm literally getting scared from watching all this horror video. My cat is like staring into the hallway, but I'm like looking and there's nothing in the hallway, so I'm like, why the fuck are you staring into the hallway? Like, I don't see anything.
Episode in a wider storyline containing clues that'll lead you little by little through each case. And as I mentioned last time, my favorite thing about it is its attention to detail. The creative team at Hunt a Killer really goes out of their way for the sake of immersion, and it really shows. Now, best of all, each box is just $25, way cheaper than a night out and way less of a headache the next morning. Play with friends, family, or that special someone or someone's if you're into that. You can get your very first box for 20% off if you head over to huntakiller.com/Rainbot and use promo code Rainbot. And good luck.
Edam Tinotats. Mayumi Arashi. The Japanese case. Don't trust Yoko's story.
Family is a complicated subject. It's often far from the idealistic support system it's usually framed as, and sayings like family is everything could take on a much darker connotation depending on who you ask. Although it didn't appear to be this way on the surface for the Arashi family, the story you're about to hear paints a slightly different picture, one that's unnerved most people who have looked into it. From missing sisters to a suspect seen heading into the woods at odd hours, to a very unsettling interview with a subliminal message, and possibly a sinister family secret. Tonight, we take a look at the bizarre disappearance of Mayumi Arashi and the mysterious notes that made this case famous.
Okay. Disappearance and interviews.
This all started in 1994 with 27-year-old Mayumi Arashi of Sumida, Tokyo, a new mother who was temporarily living with her parents and older sister following the birth of her, by then, 1-year-old daughter. On September 2nd of that same year, around 7 p.m., Mayumi was visibly uneasy and told her family that she was going to head out to meet a classmate. A little odd, sure, but no one suspected anything more of it. By the next day, however, Mayumi still hadn't returned home, and she was never seen again. Or so we think. By this point in 1994, Mayumi's case was relatively unknown to anyone outside of the Arashi family, and things stayed that way until nearly 2 decades later, when in 2011, an investigative segment on the news caught wind of Mayumi's disappearance and decided to interview the family. This is where things take a bizarre turn. While Mayumi's father was being interviewed, some viewers took note of an ominous message taped to the bookshelf behind him. The handwritten sign was in plain view and said, "Don't believe Yoko's story." To anyone just tuning in, this may have been creepy, but not necessarily sinister. That is until you rewind the interview and realize that Yoko is Mayumi's older sister. In fact, she was the one interviewed first by the news station, and although a copy of the interview hasn't made its way online, those who watched that day claim to have seen something that makes this even more chilling. While Yoko was talking, they noticed an elderly woman behind her trying to do something, but because of the framing, it's unclear what at first. By all accounts, it seemed to be the mother of the two sisters taping the note to the bookcase, attempting to do so without her eldest daughter noticing. This, of course, just begs the question, why?
Weird.
To some, it almost seemed like the elderly couple were afraid of their own daughter. At no point did the dad or mom or any of the interviewers bring up the note or anything about Yoko for that matter. Each and every member of the family simply reiterated whatever they could about Mayumi, providing the news with any and all information that they had that could possibly help solve this case. That is, of course, if you choose to believe that Yoko was at all interested in telling the truth.
I mean, this seems weird because, like, this isn't stealth, right? Like, you know, if I'm on some interview on TV, I'm going to watch it, so, like, if they're trying to do this behind her back, she would notice the paper if she was the interview on TV. Yoko's story. What is her story?
Don't trust Yoko. Don't believe Yoko's story. Don't trust the words of Yoko. The note behind Mr. Arashi in the interview could be translated in a number of ways, but one thing was clear. Whatever Yoko was claiming was not to be taken as truth. But what was it exactly that Yoko said during that interview?
Yes.
According to her, she had all kinds of information on what happened to her sister. It turns out the classmate Mayumi went to meet was also a friend of Yoko, and the two arranged a meeting the day after Mayumi vanished. According to said classmate, she never did make plans to meet with Mayumi, and if that was the case, why did Mayumi lie to her family about where she was going? Yoko adds even more lore to this tale, claiming to have found a handwritten confession left behind by her little sister in the days following her disappearance. Within the note, Mayumi admits to cheating on her husband with a man referred to only as A. After asking for forgiveness, she, for some reason, leaves this man's phone number. Mayumi also claimed that A had betrayed her somehow, but that was never clarified. Yoko claims that in the following days, she received calls from A who claimed to have been with Mayumi before she went missing. This A person also mentions that if Mayumi's body is found, then he hopes the punishment for what happened is prison. Whether or not that's supposed to be a confession is unclear. Yoko wanted to get to the bottom of this and decided the best way to do so was to hire a private investigator, someone who could trace A and possibly uncover the whereabouts of her lost sister. Yoko claimed to have paid the private investigator for a 6-month period ending in early 1995, of which only one notable incident has been reported. According to the private investigator, he at one point followed A into a heavily wooded area. A held 2 drinks, one in each hand, and proceeded onto a hiking trail. Now, this might not seem like the strangest thing in the world, but it turns out that this was in the middle of the night, and as such, it brought upon suspicion that the second drink was for Mayumi, who was perhaps being held captive. But once again, this was Yoko's version of events, the ones that we're not supposed to believe. As it turns out, no one else ever saw the handwritten confession of
I was gonna say what happened to the note, and also, like, did she tell this story in 1994, or did she tell that story already to the cops or something? Or did she only start telling that story like 20 years later or 10 years later or something?
Of Mayumi's infidelity. Yoko, upon reading it, tore it up and threw it away out of anger, or at least that's what she claims. The police never saw the note, and neither did the Arashi parents. Did Yoko even actually get any calls from this A person? It's even unclear if a private investigator really did get involved or if that was a fabrication too. According to some sources, the parents supposedly did get a call from a strange male, probably A, but it seems Yoko may have still been the one to make this claim on their behalf. If you dig a little deeper into this, it'll also become apparent that on the day of Mayumi's disappearance, she actually only told Yoko, not the entire family, that she was going to meet up with a classmate. Yoko was the only one who knew anything here, but if she isn't to be trusted, then it's quite possible that most, if not all, of her story was fabricated. But why? Again, the story starts off in obscurity, just like the other countless missing persons cases across Japan and the entire world for that matter. But in 2011, after the Arashi segment aired, suddenly there was some interest in it, both from Japan and overseas. Naturally, the internet would start investigating, but this case is just like quicksand, and the more you look into it, the muddier things get.
Fair enough. I mean, in a sense, yeah, like she could be a pathological liar, she could, I don't know, like maybe it's true that she found out she cheated and so she made a love story, so maybe like she ran away and Yoko was like, I'll make a lot of story to just, you know, make sure people think she's dead, or what else could it be, like, I don't know, her sister killed her for some reason and so she's making all the stories, like, it could be a lot of things. But obviously the sussiest thing in the pound being like, don't trust her, like, that's the weirdest thing. And like, with the way they did it with like the note and like that. It's the weirdest thing.
The disappearance of Mayumi Arashi and the mysterious note seen during her father's interview is a case that definitely has its following, but it isn't necessarily the behemoth that some other cases end up being, especially when you're talking about the English-speaking side of the internet.
Sure.
Personally, I believe that this has to do with how difficult this case is to look into, and how little we have to work from. In fact, there's so little.
And I mean, even if, it's always like that, right? Like, if you don't speak Japanese, which most people might be interested in a case, like, you're not going to manage to do much, right? Because you would have to search on a lot of Japanese website for different info and stuff like that. So that's a barrier, right?
Here that many have written this off as either a hoax or some kind of creepypasta, either via Photoshop or incorrect captioning, a mere tale using the allure of foreign obscurity to sell its believability. As mentioned earlier, a copy of the interviews never made its way online, something hard to believe in today's day and age. We have a couple screenshots, but that's about it. Many online couldn't even be sure if this was a real TV program that had aired, or something more akin to Unsolved Mysteries meets Candle Cove. We know that Yoko's story wasn't to be trusted, but was any of this to be trusted at all? As it turns out, yes. Given the general lack of sources on the English side of the net, it became necessary for me to start doing searches in Japanese, at least to the best of my ability. Super J Channel is often cited as the entity that ran the segment about the Arashi family, and I feel it's necessary to clarify a few things before we move forward. Super J Channel is actually the name of the show, not the channel itself. According to Japanese Wikipedia, it's your standard news and informational show that runs every evening and is produced by the TV Asahi network. Some of the show's content has made its way onto YouTube, so even without access to Japanese TV, we can confirm its existence. Now, to be more specific, the piece about Mayumi Arashi was covered on a sub-segment within Super J Channel, one by the roughly translated name Whereabouts of the Truth, which focuses more on true crime type investigations rather than your standard news. Episodes of this can be found online, but unfortunately the catalog is not complete. Now, despite this, there were still some who weren't convinced. In their eyes, even if the show was legit, it didn't mean that the images were, given how easy it is to fake things, or how strange it was that no one could find a copy of the actual video. Again, anyone could have made some kind of translation error, or taken the screenshot out of context, or the creator of the so-called story could have named a real show to muddy the waters. However, it does seem that we have two main things working against that theory. One would be this archive from TV Asahi's program listing that describes the episode in great detail, even giving us a specific air date of October 13th, 2011. And the second point would be the live responses from local viewership online. A thread on a forum site had been started, the archive conversations dating to around the initial broadcast. There, the users discuss everything that you and I are talking about right now, but they offered a uniquely Japanese perspective. They knew the network was real, they knew the news show was real too. Many had even been watching the investigative segment and saw the mother stick the ominous note on the bookshelf. So, given all of this, how did they try to debunk it? Some posited the theory that the segment had actually been something roughly translating to a broadcast ban, a fake or mockumentary-style horror segment in Japanese TV or film, supposedly pioneered by Fuji TV. In general, these types of segments are supposed to come with a disclaimer stating that they're works of fiction, but despite this, controversy still surrounds broadcast ban shows due to many tuning in late and missing the message only to end up duped. To further push this theory, some on the Japanese net point out that Yoko and Mayumi bear a striking resemblance to a well-known female comedy duo. Anywhere you look up Mayumi Arashi on the Japanese net, you'll see people bring this up. But Super J Channel, despite the name, is supposed to be a straightforward and serious news show, and so is its investigation segment. Aside from this one instance that's suspicious, the show has no track record of planting creepy stories or bizarre visuals. And to top this all off, Mayumi was listed on Japan's database for missing people for a number of years. By all accounts,
Okay,
it is
so
pretty
real?
obvious that TV Asahi did not fabricate the story.
Yeah.
According to the archive description on their website, during their investigation, they enlisted the help of a retired detective, one that very much exists and can be looked up online. But at this point, without a copy of the episode in question, we
Right,
don't even
right.
know what Super J Channel was able to uncover. Based on the thread I mentioned earlier, along with recaps written on Japanese blogs, it all seems to have ended up at a dead end because, again, all the news and the detective had at their disposal was Yoko's supposedly untrustworthy testimony. The episode summary on the website gives us a general overview of the case, but doesn't actually spoil any details about the investigation that Super J Channel did itself. But
Yeah.
it does tease at one of Mayumi's friends being interviewed, and it seems that she's actually able to confirm
So I guess all this just means we get to find the
the
episode.
existence of this A person. Without the video, of course, it's
That's all.
unclear exactly what the context of all this was or what was really taken from this
Not much
interview.
can be done without the
It
episode,
seemed to
yeah.
have something to do with Mayumi spending large amounts of money on A, whoever he is.
Okay. Theories. There's always
With
theories.
the legitimacy of the Super J Channel episode no longer in question, what are we left with and what theories can we extract from the information we do have? If Yoko is right, then who is A and what is his
It's still
actual
very little
connection to
info, though.
Mayumi and what did she mean when she wrote of his betrayal? If Yoko is lying, then one would naturally have to wonder if perhaps she had something to do with her sister's disappearance.
Right.
Or at least knows what actually happened. What
Or it's
about
more
the
to,
rest of
cover
the
up something
family?
shameful
Could they
or
be
something.
hiding something? Let's go with Occam's razor first, the simplest solution and the most likely. Let's say Mayumi really was having an affair. Based on how the letter was worded, the betrayal, the apology to her family for the infidelity, you can assume that Mayumi felt guilty. Maybe even guilty enough to skip town and never show her face in Tokyo again. This,
Right.
after all, wouldn't be the first time something like this has happened. In fact, Japan is actually home to a phenomenon roughly translated as evaporating people, something that technically exists everywhere, but in a Japanese context, it's when someone chooses to vanish and assume a new identity, or really none at all, usually to escape financial burden, or in some cases, even turbulent relationships at home. On the other hand, however, she was a new mother.
I remember watching like a YouTube video once about I forget what channel was doing it, but it was a documentary about literally like a moving company in Japan whose whole thing was to disappear people. And so you would pay them like quite an amount of money and they would really go out of their way to make that happen for you. So like it's a lot of like not only help you move in secrecy and stuff like that, but also like a lot of stuff like changing name and stuff like that. The episode was specifically about a woman trying to run away from her husband who was crazy. But yeah, I wish I could remember the video, but I recommend looking for something like that. It's very interesting. Like there's literal companies about disappearing people. Yeah. Or like giving them new identity and stuff like that.
And it is very hard to believe that anyone would want to abandon their very young child, even if it is something that happens.
Right.
It's also a little strange that Mayumi was supposedly uneasy before leaving, but again, that's part of Yoko's story. This brings us to the rest of the Arashi family. They
Does
don't
anyone try
want
to
us to
contact the
believe that
families?
Mayumi simply left the family. This, of course, could be for a number of reasons. For one, it's embarrassing, especially in Asian cultures, so the note saying not to trust Yoko could have actually been a poorly executed attempt to save face by an elderly couple that didn't want one daughter making the other look bad on national television. Of course, it's also entirely possible that they're the ones who are right and Yoko is indeed lying. But again, why would
could be a
Yoko
lot.
lie? To this point, many assume that it might just be a case of sibling rivalry, that Yoko was jealous of her sister to some degree,
Let's
or maybe
pretend
she
they're
was taking
Japanese.
the opportunity
It
to
could
be in
be.
the spotlight. After all, the way
How do
things
you
are
know?
right now put Yoko directly in the center of the story by proxy. Could this, though, actually have been an attempt at an alibi? Some people think so. An alternative theory stemming from Yoko possibly being jealous is one where she framed whoever A is. After all, it made no sense for Mayumi to leave this person's phone number to the family in the letter she supposedly wrote. Taking it one step further, it's even possible that A and Yoko work together, but if that was really the case, then many of their choices do come off as rather bizarre, since one would assume that it would have been much safer to just not bring A up at all. Once again, the inclusion of his phone number makes no sense. The note on the bookshelf is definitely the main point of focus for most people in this case, possibly even more so than the supposed letter Yoko found that was written by Mayumi. I think to most people, it may have come off like the elderly Arashi couple was afraid of their eldest daughter, which is something that feeds the narrative of Yoko having something to do with Mayumi's disappearance. It's almost like they know something we don't. After all, why not just call her out or confront her? As most of you probably already know, doing such a thing isn't exactly how the culture works, and it's also possible that Yoko is unwell to some degree, possibly even delusional, something that we, the audience, would have no way of knowing. Maybe the parents aren't actually afraid of Yoko, but also don't have it in them to call her out because she doesn't realize the absurdity of her claims. Note, this is merely speculation and just one possibility out of many, as there isn't any direct evidence that Yoko is suffering from any condition.
After Mass.
In doing research for this case, I stumbled upon a very interesting detail that somehow makes this case even weirder than it already is. To recap, Mayumi went missing in 1994 and was supposedly searched for by a private investigator until 1995. The interview with Super J Channel aired in 2011. 2 years later, in 2013, Yoko supposedly went missing as well, and to this day, neither sister has ever been found. Yoko's disappearance usually isn't focused much when this case is talked about, and I couldn't find any official missing persons records, but based on what I read from various Japanese blogs and social media posts, Yoko is gone. But the details of exactly when and how are still unclear.
That's kind of a big deal.
A lot of people online who have stumbled upon this story think it's a little weird that the news isn't all over this. But as I mentioned before, disappearances are as common in Japan as they are anywhere else in the world. And
yeah, but now there's like a whole fucking mystery, right? There's the note, there's the two sisters. I feel like this is perfect for, like, you know, TV shows and news.
In most cases, they don't become national news with wall-to-wall coverage anywhere else either. It's just a sad reality that there are too many missing people in the world to count. So more often than not, most of them are quickly forgotten by society, and it seems that that would have been the case here as well if it wasn't for the internet. The last official update on this case came to us in the form of a non-update from the Japanese missing persons database mentioned earlier. While it once showed a profile for Mayumi, the link is currently dead. For a while though, it did show something else. In 2015, the profile was replaced by a message simply saying, "Thank you for your cooperation." Japanese users who stuck around with the story noticed that this was actually kind of odd. Other cases on the database usually offer up more details than that, like if a person was found, for example. This vague "thank you," did it mean that Mayumi came home? Did the family somehow make contact? It's even possible that remains were found, although that's obviously not what anyone is
But like when a missing person is found dead or alive, it's announced or it's updated.
hoping for. Cases that predate Mayumi's exist on the site to this day, so her profile wasn't just removed due to its age. Although many blog posts that I read did mention that legally, Mayumi's case is now too old to be pursued by any legal authorities. Obviously, I'm no lawyer, especially not of Japanese law, but I think it's pretty safe to say that this one is unfortunately never being solved, especially with the only supposed witness now missing as well. I did try to reach out to TV Asahi and the detective they brought on the show, but unsurprisingly, I wasn't able to get through to either. If by chance you live in Japan or maybe have family there and you know of which episode,
I'm gonna say, like, this is from 4 years ago, so there might be some update by now. Like, let's try to look it up. Any update? 6 years ago. 2024. April 7, 2024. Is there? Oh, this is a podcast. No, I'm guessing there's still no info. Like, otherwise we we would know. I don't know. Let's do from here we go. 2022 now. 6 years ago. Namu Wiki. Unsolved disappearance in Japan, deployment. Don't believe Yoko's word. Okay. Piece of cake. Alright. Let me zoom. Estimated that she was between... Wait. The missing person Mayumi Arashi was registered as a missing person on the site as an NPO organization in Japan called the Missing Person Search and Community Safety Support Association, but her profile has now been taken down and changed to thank you for your cooperation. It's unclear then when her profile was taken down, but based on the site archive, it's estimated at the site that she was between 2015 and 2020. There's an opinion that the case has been concluded based on this, but on the site, if the missing person is found safely or reunited with the family, the person's initial has been reunited with the family is the usual message. Okay. Yeah. And Yoko is said to have disappeared. 2 years after a missing person broadcast looking for her was broadcast. So I wonder if like the sister, like Yoko Mayumi, I wonder if she's been found. Let's see if there's an update on that. Yoko Mayumi. Found? Nah, I guess not. Strange letter. Yeah, no. Okay. Well, this is another one that remains a complete mystery. Frankly, it could be so many things, as was said in the video, right? Like, there's a lot of theories that could make sense, and yeah, it's always so frustrating because, yeah, like, we just don't know. I guess that's it.